With or without me, I'm afraid you're in for a nasty day.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 163 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Monday, March 18th, 1985. So we're in week 34 now.
And I found an old sweater of mine from the 80s. Can you tell?
And I'm wearing a Sylvester McCoy t-shirt. I think he started in 85 as the Doctor, didn't he? No, maybe it was 87. Still Colin Baker. The judge says, "Oh, you need a second person to sign an affidavit. Someone who knows that Sophia's dead." Now, I thought that that's when things would become problematical, because everyone in the room knows she's not and wouldn't be able to swear to that. Mason shows up from behind a pillar and says, "I'll offer my services to drop that document. Now that I'm on my own, though, I'll need to be paid in cash, $1,000 in advance." Cece has him thrown out. He'd rather wait for one of his lawyers at his law firm to come than to have Mason do it. And he specifically tells him not to send the same lawyer who only drew up the one copy for him today, knowing that he would need two.
You know, for what in today's term would probably be a billionaire, CC seems to have very shoddy service. I mean, his security never seems to work very well. He's having all these problems with his lawyers. I could probably think of other things that just have been very subpar, all things considered.
As the two guards come to take Mason away, he jokes that he hired them. And then he shouts back at Dad, "With or without me, I'm afraid you're in for a nasty day." Brandon meets Sophia. She helps him to tie his tie. He's getting ready for the wedding. Gina walks in to find her helping Brandon and is very annoyed by that. Tells Brandon to leave and has an argument with her. At one point mentioning that she was 14 and Summer was 10 when their parents were killed. This was part of her discussion with Sophia about how she needs a family or something like that. Sophia doesn't really, the fact is Sophia seemed to be willing to let Gina marry Cece, so she doesn't just come right out and say it, though. Like a lot of times. Sophia just stands there and doesn't tell someone something. That ends up dragging things out for another week or month or year.
I wondered if part of the reason she doesn't really say much is that perhaps she's trying to get a bit more of a measure of Gina and just sort of see what she's going to do. And yeah, that's sort of how I took it. Brandon
tells Cece that his mom is fighting with the lady upstairs. So Cece tries to go upstairs. He even tries to stop and say, "Oh, I'll go," but Cece pushes past and goes up. So Sophia hides in the closet when they realize Cece's outside the door. And then Gina says, "Oh, yes, I was just hiring a maid for Rosa, or interviewing a maid for Rosa." So, and then there's several attempts to keep Cece from going into the closet. He wants to change his clothes. Mason returns with the guards and Hank, who they've caught on the grounds. And Mason's pretty happy that they caught Hank, because now he can make all sort of insinuations about how Hank knows Gina, and then in front of Cece tells Gina that she should tell Cece how she knows Hank from Atlantic City. So Gina tells Cece a large percentage of the story, I think, that Hank was obsessed with her in Atlantic City and that he chased her around, and when she hid, he went to Summer to get the information and ended up raping Summer. So it makes it sound like she didn't have a relationship with Hank at all. Cece says, "Well, just tell me, did you ever sleep with him?" And she says, "No." So isn't it, it's an odd question for Cece to ask. I mean, like, how is that really relevant? And then Gina's saying no isn't interesting. I mean, I guess it's her word against Hank's, really, if she did. So I think she made the fair call to say no if she's lying. And Cece asks her if there are any more secrets that will come out after the wedding, and she says no. So Cece seems to buy this, but after the judge leaves, saying he's got another appointment and he'll have to come back tomorrow, Cece asks Eden what she found out when she was investigating Gina. So she's now in the Joe Perkins category as a potential gold digger now.
There were a few things that stood out for me in this scene. The first one is just how incredibly stupid Hank is. Because his whole threat to Gina was that he would expose her. And he was basically blackmailing her, and that as long as he kept quiet, she could marry CC, but then she'd funnel the money to him to keep him quiet. But there he is, skulking around in the yard, and, you know, he basically just cops to the whole thing. I mean, he's basically lost his source of blackmail money.
Right.
So that was really stupid. And then two other things that struck me. I think we're starting to see with Gina very much her survival skills and why she has managed to last this long, because she basically twice that I counted in her conversation with CC, she throws Mason under the bus. She knows that CC is not really a big fan of Mason's at this point, and she kind of pushes it a little further. Now, that may at some point come back and bite her a bit if CC and Mason ever reconcile. But right now, she seems to have calculated that her safest option is to add Mason to the mix, just to make it all seem a little bit, you know, better for her, just to get her that a little bit more of a distance, and to remove Mason a little bit more as a threat.
She says that Hank was a suspect in Summer's murder, and that's how Mason found out about her, about him.
And then the third thing I noticed was at the beginning of the conversation, I think Mason actually says something like this before he leaves. He says, "Oh, ask her about Atlantic City." I think that was what it was. I noticed CC never asked her about Atlantic City. He fretted about her sleeping with Hank, but he never actually followed up and asked her about Atlantic City.
Right. And Gina said, "Oh, he's the reason I left South Carolina." So yeah, there's still a thread that hasn't been pulled, I guess.
Yeah.
Augusta catches Lionel with binoculars looking at the Capwell house. She says, "Oh, you're hoping someone on the second floor will be getting undressed?" And he says, "Oh, just wondered if the wedding was over." So she's not too happy about that. Talks to Warren, who's trying to get through to Maggie on the phone, and Warren flat out tells her about the two-way mirror in the Capwell Hotel, which is interesting, because I had remembered, the only thing I remembered about the two-way mirror was that at one point Augusta knows about it. And I always, in the past weeks, when she was near the room, I thought, oh, maybe Augusta stumbles on the room somehow herself. It never occurred to me that someone would just flat out tell her about it. So she gets Warren to show her the secret room, which is very happy at its existence, and they watch Mason and Sophia have a conversation while they're there. And then she says, "Oh, I've got a surprise plan for your father."
This room was made for Augusta. Really just works with her skill set.
Our last remnant of Peter Flint.
Yeah.
Mason visits Lionel to pick up his Chinese puzzle box, and Lionel says, "Oh, it's currently inaccessible. I need 2 days." Of course, he's having a fake one made, but I mean, he should have just said, "Oh, I sent it to a friend in San Francisco for appraisal, and it'll take 2 days to come back."
Yeah.
Then when Mason leaves, Augusta pretends that she found a note that someone slipped under the door, addressed to Lionel. And of course, it's a note Augusta wrote and signed Sophia's name to, saying, "Oh, I'm planning to leave town. Come to the Capwell Hotel immediately and come to my suite." So Lionel buys it and immediately makes up a fake story to Augusta as to why he needs to go out and needs to do some puzzle box work, apparently. So Augusta calls up Cece and says, "Cece, meet me at the Capwell Hotel 5th floor." And, she has to talk him into it a little bit. But she says, "Oh, it's about Sophia's past and Lionel's past." And I guess that's sufficient to get him to come visit Augusta. So Lionel has already arrived by the time Cece gets there. Lionel realizes it's a trap and wants to leave, but Sophia pulls him in and says they have to figure out who sent the note. This gives Augusta time to show Cece into the linen closet and open up the panel that's covering the two-way mirror. And Sophia has her back to the mirror. Mm-hmm. So although they can see Lionel and Sophia having this conversation, Cece doesn't realize it's Sophia. Says, "I don't really care. Who's Lionel sleeping with? I don't know why you dragged me up here to spy on your husband." And Augusta hasn't turned on the audio at this point either. So she says to Cece, "Look closely. You know this woman."
Now, I'm hoping that Sophia does actually turn around when we watch the next episode and reveal herself, and that this isn't another red herring on our path to her revealing herself to Cece.
Mm-hmm. She could theoretically walk out the door and down the elevator before.
Yeah.
Cece.
I mean, we know that eventually they're going to meet, but
it feels like it must be time.
Yeah. The other thing that I was struggling with a little bit, just with this whole episode, was that it seemed to me that Lionel didn't know his wife's handwriting or Sophia's handwriting. So, I don't know, maybe the note was typed, but it just seemed interesting that he was so easily fooled by that.
That is a good point. And it all really predicated on Cece getting there before Lionel came and went. Really. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, because, Lionel and Sophia could very easily have decided, "Oh yeah, this is a trap. You should get out of here right away."
Yeah.
So, although, I guess the whole point is that Cece sees Sophia. I guess she could still have shown Cece the what's behind the panel without Lionel being in the room.
Yeah.
So that is it for this episode, but it should pick up, I would think, in the secret room, and hopefully Cece will find out. Maybe they'll turn on the audio first, and he'll slowly recognize the voice, and then she'll turn around. And then will he burst into the room? I guess that makes sense.
It's very much the way of this version of Cece, to burst into things. Mm-hmm. Stomp around. So we're hoping for that, and not that he just stomps out and announces Augusta's wasting his time and that we have to wait another 3 episodes before an opportunity arises.
Well, yeah, because we still have Hank as a potential reason why the wedding could be stopped. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't need to see Sophia in order for the wedding not to go on. So, yeah, it just feels like it should be happening. Mm-hmm. But, we'll see when we watch episode 164 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back to week 34. We finished episode 164 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Tuesday, March 19th, 1985. At the police station, Hank is let go, because apparently when he was apprehended by Mason and the guards, he was actually not on the Capwell property. Mm-hmm. And Cece doesn't want to press charges, which is weird, since why would he even be able to?
Yeah, if he hasn't done anything wrong, there's no charges to press.
So, as Maggie is assigned to signing him out, he hits on her and she ends up spilling something on him. And then Warren tells Cruz that someday someone's going to take him out. So I'm thinking Hank is going to end up dead at some point.
Yeah, that's a good bet, I think.
We've got Warren now as a suspect. Gina's an obvious suspect. Maybe Cece. So he may piss off a few more people before the deed happens, and they'll have a whodunit.
Yeah. Another one, a whodunit, in addition to their other whodunit.
That's right. Their 6-year-long whodunit that they haven't talked about for a while. There, I guess no one's worried because of the typed note that they all think Peter wrote, and we have no idea who wrote. Warren makes a date with Maggie and picks her up, and they end up driving around and kind of having meandering conversations, and they decide not to go for dinner or for a drive, and he just drives her home. Once again, she makes him drop her off a few blocks from home, and she says, I can't tell you why.
So there's another little mystery there.
They did mention during their talk that she believes in fidelity, so a theory that maybe she has a husband at home maybe is not right because she's dating Warren. So she's taking care of a sick father or something.
Yeah, unless she's really into fidelity and is a widow or something like that. I don't know. No, that wouldn't make sense.
Maybe
I don't
her
know.
husband's in a coma or something, and she's taking care of him at home.
Yeah.
Like on the Blacklist. Eden manages to, while flirting with Cruz, sneak a look at Hank's file. That's part of the research her dad asked her to do, and Cruz gets upset with her. But she ends up going back to his houseboat with him and cooking him dinner. And they start talking about that time they danced at Kelly and Joe's reception, and Cruz mentions that he thought that the look in Cece's eyes may have been not entirely happy, considering he's Mexican.
Yeah.
So that's something we definitely wouldn't put past Cece, no matter how much he covers it. He certainly does cover a lot when he hates someone, and then it comes out, like with Joe. So yeah, that could be an impediment to them getting together, because we know how Cece likes to treat his children that disappoint him.
Yes, we've seen that.
Now, Cece and Augusta are in the secret room, and Augusta's trying to keep, doesn't tell Cece that there's audio. He even asks about it, and she claims there is none. But he finds the button and turns it on. So I think because Augusta had set up the meeting, she didn't want Cece to overhear them just discussing about mysterious notes, I guess.
And there is actually a little period of time when we still don't know if Cece's even going to recognize Sophia, because she doesn't turn around for the longest time. And Augusta is not turning on the sound. Cece keeps saying, oh, if only I could hear the conversation. And we're kind of thinking the same thing, I think, in the audience.
Yeah, why not just turn on the thing? So maybe Augusta just wanted it to be suspenseful.
Yeah.
For when she spun around finally.
But then finally Sophia does turn around, and we get the reaction from Cece that we've been looking for this whole time. And
so when they turn the audio on, Lionel and Sophia were right in the middle of talking about how Sophia missed her children all these years and how much she loved them. Of course, they turn it on partway through a sentence, and for the rest of the conversation, they think Sophia is telling Lionel how much she loves him. Sophia says, it was terrible having... no, she had said how much she had for her children, and then after the sound was turned on, Lionel says that he feels the same way. So it sounded to Augusta like Lionel was admitting he loved Sophia. Then Sophia says, it was so terrible last year on the Orient Express having to keep my distance. Of course, talking about Eden, but this whole conversation makes both Cece and Augusta assume the affair has been going on forever.
Yeah.
And they even conclude that Sophia and Lionel faked her death on purpose so they could be together all these years.
Yeah.
So Augusta actually cries because of this, and Cece's a bit surprised, saying, "Didn't you know all this?" She said she didn't want to believe it.
Yeah, we've got a very emotional Cece and a very emotional Augusta in a small room, and in a way they're kind of, I wouldn't say they're egging each other on exactly, but they're kind of feeding each other's worst fears about what this relationship actually is between Sophia and Lionel.
Mm-hmm. So while they're not paying attention, Lionel leaves, and Cece just says, "Oh, I can't stand to look at her anymore," and tries throwing a chair through the two-way mirror. We don't see if it gets damaged by that. He then ends up running out and breaking down the door to the presidential suite. And so Sophia's shocked, of course, to see Cece.
Now, it's not really that secure a door, is it? If an elderly gentleman like Cece could just sort of push it over.
Most hotel rooms that we've been in are pretty sturdy. Eden and Cruz arrive at that time, and then Cruz leaves, and Warren's there, and he leaves, and Eden goes in, and is not surprised that Sophia's alive, and Cece quickly realizes that Eden knew, and he says, "You knew and kept it from me," and she, immediately reverts to little girl state, because she goes, "Oh, Daddy, I thought it would be the best thing to do, and I told her to get out of town," and he says, "Get out of here," and she goes, "Yes, Daddy," and leaves. So, that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I actually don't think Warren was there at that point. But
He does show up briefly to talk to Augusta, but then leaves immediately.
Yeah,
I think. It was very short. But Augusta phones Lincoln too.
Yeah, but I was going to say, I think Cruz actually had the right idea in this scene where he just says, "I'm not getting involved with this," and he just leaves. I sort of wondered why Eden would interject herself in this. I mean, I guess she's very protective of Cece, but obviously Cece and Sophia are going to have a lot to hash out.
So Cece's angry with Sophia, of course. On the way out, Eden and Augusta have a bit of a discussion while the elevator's on its way, and Augusta blames Sophia for seducing Lionel all those years ago, and Eden just says, "Oh, shut up."
Yeah.
Gets on the elevator.
Now, mind you, you can see why Augusta's not really that enthused about Eden reaching out to her, because, of course, Eden has had her own sort of relationship with Lionel as well.
Augusta throws in a line or two about that as well. So she calls Lakin to find out if Lionel's home, and says, "Don't tell him that I called." And she goes home, and no one's home, and she starts crying because she assumes her marriage is over.
Yeah. Any thoughts to where Lionel is?
I don't know, because he was on his way home, and I don't know where else he would go.
I thought maybe he was off tending to the Chinese puzzle box.
Maybe
Situation.
We'll see that he's checked in with Dave Chang. Yeah, I don't know who else he would visit. I mean, he's worried that someone's sent him a note to trick him. So, I don't know, now that he's not at Sophia's. Yeah, I have no idea where he would go. So, back in the Sophia and Cece discussion, Sophia says she only slept with Lionel before they were married, and then Cece says, "And after?" She says, "Well, that was only a couple of times, and I can explain it."
Yeah.
So this is just, what she's been doing since we first seen her. It's just she's been really just glossing over that part of their relationship and blaming it all on Lionel lying to her about being married for the first part of their relationship. So, yeah, it's probably going to be hard for her to explain to anyone. And then, of course, building on what Cece and Augusta theorized in the room, Cece says, and then you faked your death all this time so that you could be with Lionel. And you've been seeing him constantly. So then he suddenly says, I can't stand to look at you anymore. All I want to do is find Lionel. His day of reckoning has arrived. So the search for Lionel is on, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't know where he is. Augusta doesn't know where he is. Cece's gonna, I don't know, might get a gun. You never know. If there's guns in the study, if I remember correctly.
Well, I wouldn't think he could do quite to Lionel what he's been doing to Mason, which is stripping away his credit and everything, just because Lionel would also be established in the community, and the Lockridges have been there for a long time, so I don't think he would have quite the control over Lionel that he's had on Mason.
Maybe he thinks he can go beat up Lionel, but might have to take some of those guards that he had beat up Joe to help him. Because, you know, it looks like he could have a heart attack at any minute himself.
Well, he's probably worn himself out knocking down that door.
And that is the cliffhanger for the episode. What will Cece do when he finds Lionel? And will Warren and Maggie ever have dinner?
Yeah, I guess that's the other one.
So we will be back after we watch episode 165 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Misha and Dianne watch Santa Barbara every week. We had attended the 35th Santa Barbara reunion cruise in November and got a Facebook message day before yesterday from Lane Davies' girlfriend who organized the cruise that she wanted to get together a Zoom chat with all of the attendees from the cruise. And yesterday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, we took part in that, and there were, I think, over 40 people there. And A. Martinez was online, Sherilyn Walter, Lane Davies, Harley Kozak, and Nicholas Coster. And apparently Judith McConnell was trying to connect, but was having technical issues.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've all recently started using Zoom more. So we have, I've been using it on 3 different machines, and it installs differently each time. For example, when I use it for work, I can change my screen name, but when I was logged in yesterday, I was logged in as you the whole time, and it wouldn't let me change the name in the middle of a chat. So now that was because it was on a MacBook, I guess. So, yeah, not entirely surprising that someone would have issues. Apparently one of the attendees fell asleep before the chat, because there were people from Europe and Australia and Russia at that cruise. But anyway, we had over a 1-hour chat, and everyone talked about how they were doing with the reduced mobility we've all been experiencing, and it was really nice to reconnect with all those people and to hear about their recent experiences.
And so interesting that you can have so many people from all over the world who all have very different professions and are in different stages of their lives, and everyone's basically stuck at home on their couch. A lot of Santa Barbara viewing going on. Unfortunately, we are moving ahead in our sequence, so the viewing parties that the Facebook groups are having are viewing episodes that are not falling into our schedule. So, unfortunately, we can't comment.
We can't really comment on those or take part in the viewing parties, really.
Yeah.
And we have gotten a bit behind too. We actually did have a message from one of our subscribers after week 31 was posted, because I haven't posted anything in over a month, wondering if there's more coming. But rest assured, we are doing the recordings. It's mainly the extras now that actually are slowing down the releases. I was usually working on them at work on my lunch break, but my lunch break has gotten reduced to half an hour now, and I can't come in early anymore and work on it before work. So that's sort of slowed down, but and try and maybe on this Easter long weekend get ahead on the extras, the spotlights, and hopefully won't be too many more cemetery-related things in the near future. But it takes a long time to go through the episodes and try to get screenshots of the characters that will be sufficient for the things. So,
and we were dealing with our share of unexpected events too.
Yeah, that's true. So we are just trying to plow ahead with the episodes so that we have them, and then hoping to find time to put 5 of them together into one release, and at least one extra per week is my goal.
Mm-hmm.
One spotlight on someone. So that is hopefully we're going to catch up at some point. I don't think we're going to match up with May the 20th anymore, because we're probably almost a month behind. March 22nd is what we're watching later, and it's April 12th today, so, but maybe we will. All right, so we're very happy to receive comments on the YouTube release from people, and happy that people are enjoying our summaries. And hopefully you are finding a place to watch Santa Barbara before you listen to our summaries.
Honeymoon Suite's not on this floor, is it?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We are in the middle of week 34 of Santa Barbara, and we've watched episode 165, originally aired Wednesday, March 20th, 1985. Warren drops Maggie off, once again a couple blocks from her house, and then he decides to get out of his car and follow her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she spots him and tells him, "Don't ever follow me again." So he gets back in his car, then he finds a card she dropped from a lawyer. So he goes to a payphone and phones her, says, "Oh, do you need this card I found?" And she says, "No, I don't need it." And then he apologizes for earlier, and she says, "Well, I have my boundaries." And he says, "Oh, let's go for a drink." So they just had a failed attempt at going out for dinner, and now he wants to go for a drink.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, "Maybe later." So he says, "Well, I'm going to go to the State Street Bar, and you can join me if you want." So he does, and she shows up, and she says she needs a lawyer. And he asks what kind, and she says, "Oh, I don't know, general practitioner." So she needs a lawyer for something.
That would jive with one theory we discussed, that perhaps she is married and needs a divorce or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something.
Yeah, there's something at her home she doesn't want Warren to see, obviously.
But she didn't ask for a divorce lawyer, though. That's the weird thing.
No. So, another possibility is maybe she has a child and needs, I don't know, greater child support or something. I don't know who would be taking care of a child if she had one. But, yeah, it's hard to say.
It's something. I feel it's another person of some kind in the house. Well, it looks like it's inching forward, so we'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
CC runs into Mason at the elevator on the 5th floor of the Capwell Hotel. And Mason says, "The honeymoon suite's not on this floor, is it, Dad?" So we actually know it isn't on that floor, because it's the top floor. And Kelly and Joe's honeymoon suite was one floor below Peter's fake honeymoon suite. Yeah. Which may or may not have been on the 5th floor. So yeah, the honeymoon suite is either on floor 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then CC realizes Mason knew and gets angry with him, and he says, I was thinking maybe I could forgive you, but now I'll never forgive you. It's kind of a very CC-like way to make a fake pronouncement and then blame it all on Mason.
It was pretty obvious he wasn't gonna in any mood to forgive Mason last time we saw him. And the other thing I noticed in this exchange is he tells Mason to get out, as he's always telling Mason to get out, and Mason says, "Well, I'm actually staying here because I don't have anywhere else to live."
Mm-hmm. So Mason says at one point, Sophia made us promise not to tell, which at first I thought was throwing Sophia under the bus, but then I realized no, it's actually him letting Cece know that everyone else knows but him.
Everyone knows. Cece was the last to learn, and Cece's not used to being in that position, and he doesn't like it.
Yeah. So Mason reveals Sophia is letting him stay there, and Cece says that I'm not for long, and Sophia's not going to be here for long either. So he's going to try to kick a paying guest out of the hotel. I don't know if that's legal. Well, I'm sure a lawyer will tell Cece eventually if he tries to do something illegal, like getting married when he's already married. So Sophia and Mason talk about what's just happened, and Sophia realizes that at first Mason doesn't believe that she hasn't maybe been carrying on with Lionel all these years. But Sophia relates what Augusta and Cece overheard, and they both conclude that, well, maybe they just heard a part of it, and they thought when you were talking about your children, you were talking about Lionel.
Yeah.
So they realize that must be the case. Cece stops by the mansion to pick up a horsewhip. And he runs into Ted, who he's angry with. He's been that angry with Ted before. A little annoyed at his schoolwork, but it's probably the first time he's been angry with Ted. And he's angry with Ted for not telling him, and kind of for siding with his mother, and then he wants Ted to apologize to Gina. And then during the course of that conversation, Gina kind of reveals that she knew too, which eventually she would have had to reveal. And she kind of papers over it a little with some half-truths. She says, oh yes, I found her with Brandon, and I don't think Mason and Sophia would hurt Brandon, but so she's trying to put it all on Mason and Sophia. And then she comes up with an even better plan and tells Cece that it would be better if she moved out, because she realizes she can't trust him. Because he never told her anything about Sophia or Pamela, nor should he have. But then, conversely, he was annoyed that she hadn't told him about Hank, and she says, "I don't trust you, so I think it's better if I leave." And so she blindsides Cece, kind of, kicks his footing out from under him, but Cece's got other fish to fry, so he says, we'll talk about this later. And then Ted's very annoyed because with Gina, because she did try to make it seem like Sophia might kidnap Brandon. Yeah. And Ted says, I'm starting to think that you're the one my father should be worried about.
And it occurs to me that that's maybe a very good early warning signal for Ted to get, because we're starting to see Gina's survival skills really kicking in. And I think skills is a good word, because we're starting to see what kind of skills she will employ to survive, and it includes manipulation and a certain amount of sort of steeliness. So yeah, I think that was actually probably a good thing for Ted to see early on.
We'll see if Gina manages to get back into Cece's good graces somehow. Yeah. Because she does skip over the parts of stories that make her look bad. Gina ends up going to the State Street bar, where she runs into Hank, and tells him that he blew it, because the only thing he really had against her was Cece not knowing about him.
And we talked about this yesterday. And she is right.
Yeah. And then she tells him that she's going out of town. She's leaving town, so there's no reason for him to even stay there.
Yeah.
He takes the opportunity to insult her once again,
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Oh, how did you get these skills to
Yeah.
interact with these, top tier people? You probably learned it in the sheets." So, and we hear on the jukebox, we hear Animotion's Obsession at one point, and then later, or possibly earlier, we hear One More Night when Lionel's at the bar later,
Yeah.
or earlier. I'm reading it later, but it probably happened earlier.
And, with this little scene between Gina and Hank, we're really seeing a very tough side of Gina that I don't think we've really seen before. We've seen her be manipulative, and of course most recently in the scene that we just saw with her and Ted and Cece. And we've certainly seen how she can work her way into situations like planning Kelly's wedding and so on. But to actually stand up to Hank and tell him to take off and not have a shred of fear over him now that he has lost that blackmail power. We're really seeing what a tough lady she is. And she must have, we're seeing why she maybe did, to a certain extent, hold her own in whatever criminal activity she and Hank were involved with before.
Yeah. It's, we're kind of assuming that it was all Hank's idea and she was just one of his participants, but for all we know, it was all her idea.
Yeah. I don't, we've only really heard, we've definitely seen the effect it had on Summer, who's a much more sort of innocent person. But we've really only had Gina's version of her past, and now as we see how she describes events in the present that we've actually been witness to, we can see that she's not really a very reliable narrator.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. We can believe the scenes she had with Summer, I guess.
I think she did genuinely care very much about Summer.
Augusta tells Lakin that there will be no more days like this. Sophia calls Lakin to warn her that Cece is coming after Lionel. Ted later also calls Lakin to warn her that his father is on the way. And he asks her to come over, but she says no. No, he wants to come over, but she says no. Meanwhile, or earlier, at the State Street Bar and Grill, Lionel buys a necklace and some earrings off of one of the patrons in a hilarious scene where a woman has been given a necklace from Cairo on their honeymoon, and Lionel offers her $1,000. Or he offers her $700, and she bargains him up to $1,000. So the husband's a little annoyed with her for selling off a wedding gift. At home, Lakin relays Sophia's warning to Lionel, and then he gives Augusta the gifts, the necklace and the earrings.
Yeah.
And she shows him his packed suitcase that is standing at the door.
Yeah.
And he says, "I can't leave here. My grandfather built this house." So she says, "Well, let's ask Minx who should be leaving." Lionel says that the only reason he saw Sophia was because of that note. And then he realizes that Augusta is the one that left that note. So, why did you do that?
It was a test. And he failed.
Yep. So Cece arrives. And Lionel says he's not impressed with Cece's little toy. And Cece says, "You were the last time." So I'm trying to think on what occasion he might have tried to take a bullwhip or a horsewhip to Lionel Lockridge. Obviously, he didn't know about the affair, so it must have been some other incident.
So for me, what came to my mind when I saw Cece with this whip was Indiana Jones, and of course, this episode in 1985 would have come out just after Raiders of the Lost Ark, and probably before the Temple of Doom. So this was right in the point when Raiders of the Lost Ark and bullwhips and that sort of swashbuckling spirit would have been a really big deal. So
Temple of Doom had already come out
Had
because
it?
I was in grade 12.
Oh,
And
okay.
I had a double spare in the afternoon, as did several of my friends. So basically, from the start of lunch, we had no more classes. And we decided to all go and see a matinee show.
Oh, okay.
It was the only time we had ever had a double spare afternoon, so it worked out well.
So Temple of Doom would have been a big deal. Would that have been in '85 when it came out?
No, I graduated in '84.
Oh, okay.
So it would have been spring of '84, I would think. So, Cece tells Augusta he'll leave a little bit left of Lionel for her. So Augusta seems to be kind of happy that Cece is punishing Lionel. And she just goes off
kind of
into
this.
the next room to, I guess, keep from witnessing some of the more grisly things. But we hear the whip cracking, and we hear lots of things smashing, and eventually we do see that he hits Lionel with the whip. He injures his hand, I think, or his wrist. And during a distraction, Lionel manages to run into the basement. Well, and Augusta said, "Oh, there's no way out of there. There are no doors or windows." So Cece runs down there and comes back up and says, "He's gone." So obviously Lionel has gone into the tunnels.
But that indicates there must be a secret door or some sort of secret entrance, because I think you'd see a huge tunnel. And it is a pretty big tunnel.
Well, my theory is it's behind a wine rack. So if I were writing it, that's where I'd put it. So Augusta, we know, doesn't know about the tunnels, but Cece might, as he's a Capwell, and the tunnels have been there for a long time, presumably, if we thought it was, bootlegging days, and it runs under the Capwell property, too. Oh, and maybe the Capwells and Lockridges of that era had a joint bootlegging business or something. Although that would have been after the feud started, so it's interesting to think who could have built the tunnel. Maybe only one side built it without the other knowing. And the doorbell. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, no. I was going to say the other thing that I noticed in this scene is we see CC, brandishing his whip. And then somehow, and we don't actually see this happen, but somehow he manages at one point to have Lionel all sort of trussled up, ready to go. So somehow Lionel actually gets caught up in this whip at one point.
I was probably typing. I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Ding dong. Rosa answers the door to find Sophia. And she's very, very shocked, even though she somewhat thought it might be true, because apparently Brandon had told her earlier that there was a lady in the house, and he had pointed to the picture of Sophia. So they have a great reunion. I mean, I thought Kelly and Sophia had a great reunion. Rosa was really glad to see Sophia, and vice versa. It seems like they really were very friendly with each other when Sophia was alive. So that went well. And then she runs into Ted, and she tells Ted that whatever he heard is not true. Now, at this point, Ted has only heard, the first part.
Yeah.
He hasn't actually heard the whole thing. So Ted says, and Ted's already angry with her just about that. He says that Cece told him he couldn't see her anymore. Then Lakin arrives to tell Ted that Sophia and Lionel have been seeing each other for years. So this is the part of the story that Sophia thought that Ted already knew. So then Ted's kind of glad that he told his mother off a little bit earlier. So Ted's relationship with Mom seems to be heading the way of Eden's relationship with Mom. Looks like she'll just have Kelly and Rosa as allies, and Brandon maybe.
Well, I think Ted is generally a more forgiving soul than Eden, so he might still be talked out of it a little bit.
But that would put him at odds with Lakin again, because Lakin says they should just believe the people who've been there the whole time, Augusta and Cece.
Yeah.
So I think if Ted tries to and make amends with his mom, that will really annoy Lakin.
And Cece.
and Cece. Mason was probably fine with it by this point.
Can I just comment on how quickly Mason gets places? Because he actually pops up at the Lockridge house as well to take in the spectacle of Cece and Lionel fighting it out with the bullwhip.
That's right, yeah, I forgot about that. Or I skimmed over it. So, slightly out of order, those are the things that happened in this episode. So, we will find out what Maggie's hiding in her basement. We'll find out if Cece remembers that there's a secret tunnel.
Mm-hmm. See where Lionel ends up. I mean, we know the other end of the tunnel is, I assume, the gazebo, but will he end up running back to Sophia? Where will he go now?
Mm-hmm. And what else? Will Gina somehow marry Cece?
Mm-hmm.
Has she managed to bluff him into taking all the blame for everything? And will he apologize and marry her anyway?
And what
He's
Hank
so
got
angry
up
with
his sleeve?
Sophia. There's no way that's going to be an impediment to him now.
Yeah.
I think it'll just be the divorce might take longer than declaring someone dead, so that might be a bit of a delay. But I think this may have all turned out positively for Gina if she can get keep Hank away from Cece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we will find out what happens next when we watch episode 166 of Santa Barbara. See you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 166 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, March 21st, 1985.
Mm-hmm.
Ted tries to get back together with Lakin,
Mm-hmm.
but she says she can't think about that at this time. They have the same conversation in about 8 different locations throughout the Capwell and Lockridge properties, but that pretty much summarizes the entire thing.
It never really changes.
No. Warren tells Lakin that they should hear Lionel's side of the story. So, she was very adamant about just listening to Augusta yesterday.
Mm-hmm. We're actually seeing that a lot in this episode where one character is trying to say something and the other won't listen to them.
Cece tears apart the Lockridge basement searching for Lionel. There's a lot of sawhorses down there, a lot of wine racks, so I guess this might be the same wine cellar where Elizabeth was doing her secret work, but then Lionel must have smuggled her in and out of the Lockridge house. I don't know.
I wouldn't think it would offer very good light for painting.
Minx arrives with her riding crop and orders Cece out of her house. But Cece finds the door to the tunnel and goes in, and it's clear that Minx was aware that there was a tunnel there.
So we have Minx with her riding crop and, of course, Cece with his horsewhip.
Yes, the standoff didn't happen because Augusta pulled Minx out of the way and let Cece into the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And Augusta wants to know who Minx used to meet in the tunnel. And Minx is distraught, doesn't want to talk about it. Warren and Lakin try to get information from her about how long the tunnels have been there. She mentions it survived the earthquake, and one of them says, did it survive the 1925 earthquake too?
Mm-hmm.
So she feigns exhaustion, and when she takes Warren's arm to have him escort her upstairs, she says, his muscles are getting soft, and maybe he should take on a hard job so that he can compete with Brick. So Warren offers his arm to Minx so that she can go up to bed, and she says, you're getting soft. Maybe you should take on a hard job if you want to keep up with Brick. So this is the first time, I think. Has she really been pitting Warren against Brick? It was Lionel before, now it's Warren too.
I think she just likes toying with them and with Brick, because none of them really quite know why Brick's there, and Brick doesn't quite know why he's there. So I think this is something that Minx is just enjoying, all of the sort of strained dynamics she's creating with Brick in the house.
Mm-hmm. Eden and Cruz have a lot of fun scenes together, flirting and kissing. And Eden and Cruz talk about going somewhere because Eden wants to get away from all this.
Yeah.
Then at one point she taunts Cruz by telling him how seductive Lionel is, because Cruz recalls that there was something with Eden and Lionel.
Yeah.
She lets him think the worst at one point.
And truthfully, we don't really know how to describe their relationship either, do
No,
we? No.
That's true. So she does say to Cruz she never slept with Lionel, but that's as far as she'll go. So. Sophia enters and explains that Cece and Augusta misheard what she and Lionel were saying in the... this is one of about 8 times in this episode she tells someone that they misheard that conversation.
Yeah.
And she says that she was in an institution for 15 years. So she's been gone for 15 years, so... she's making it sound like she's been in an institution the whole time. Even though we know she married Count Armonti at one point. We know she came to Channing's party at one point 5 years ago.
We know that she must have been living sometime in Europe.
So there's more to that 15-year saga that we haven't quite heard. Lakin tells Ted that there's a tunnel and that Cece and Lionel are in it. Sophia overhears and runs off. And she runs into, not to the gazebo, where we know there's an exit to the tunnel, but to the study. And she opens the bookcase that Mason had previously hidden behind to reveal that there's a secret passage there that leads into the tunnels. So this is an exciting new revelation. There's at least 3 entrances to the tunnels.
This is a much more complicated tunnel system than we had imagined, I think.
And it adds an exciting new possibility to the Channing murder mystery, now that we know that there's another way into the study. Warren tells Eden that there's a tunnel, and she and Cruz follow Sophia, because they figure that's where she went, and they get to the study, and just like when Cece entered the Lockridge basement, there's no one there, and no obvious way out. So they decide to search for the tunnel and alternate flirting and searching, and at one point they're kissing, and I guess Sophia didn't lock the bookcase down, because as Eden ends up leaning back against it, the door opens, and they find the tunnel. Inside the tunnel, Sophia finds Lionel, saying that she's come to save his life. And he says he wants to face Cece. So Sophia knocks down his candle so that he can't see, in hopes of keeping that from happening. Sophia finds Cece and tells him he misunderstood the conversation he overheard in the secret room. And he doesn't really believe that, but she says, she only slept with Lionel 5 times after they were married. The first time was when Kelly was sick and she slept on the floor of the hospital bed and Cece never came home. And another time was when Cece just abruptly vanished for 3 days and with no explanation.
Now I want to hear more about that. I'm hoping that that'll play into either this storyline or a future storyline down the road.
So Cece says, well, I didn't cheat on you, so none of what you're saying is relevant. And Lionel finds them eventually in the dark, and he and Cece start to fight. And they land quite a few blows. At least they're using fists now instead of whips. Eden and Cruz get Ted and bring him to the study, and are about to go into the tunnel when Sophia comes out of it. And she says, don't go in there, they're together. And now she's thinking that they should just settle it, which is kind of what Augusta was thinking, even though Sophia's been trying to stop them from getting together the whole time. I don't think Cruz is just going to let them settle it. I think Cruz, at the very least, is going to go down into that tunnel. So, that is the exciting conclusion. So we've got, the potential of there being quite a few people in that tunnel tomorrow. Cruz, Ted, and Eden, and Sophia coming in from the Capwell side. Cece and Lionel fighting somewhere in the middle. Augusta, Lakin, and Warren might enter from the Lockridge side.
Yeah, right now it's kind of a fun image where we have the Lockridges in their house wondering what's going on. We've got the Capwells in their house wondering what's going on, and we've got Cece and Lionel fighting in the middle of the tunnel underneath them.
In near darkness, because Cece had a flashlight. At least Sophia had a lantern, which I assume she took back with her when she left them to their fight.
Now, I'm going to be interested to see what happens when Mason pops up, because last time we saw Mason, he was sort of watching the fight unfolding at the Lockridge house. So he's now disappeared, but it'll be interesting when he comes back on the scene, because apparently he did know about the hidden area in the study, did he not?
Yeah, because he hid in it himself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a second door inside there that leads to the tunnels that he never spotted, or if he knew about the tunnels and just didn't care, or as Mason does, he's keeping it in his back pocket for something else. But
I'm also wanting to hear a little bit more about Lionel and Sophia when they're talking in the tunnel. I think Lionel says something to Sophia like, "Oh, I know you were in terrible pain," or something like that. And I'd like to know a little bit more about what he was alluding to when he said that.
And they do talk once again about the previous fight Cece and Lionel had. Not clear what that was about, though.
We also need to know, so Sophia's given explanation for 2 of her rendezvous with Lionel. It'd be interesting to see what the other 3 were prompted by.
It take a long time to draw out. So Mason could well show up in a tunnel in the near future. And Marcella was last seen with Kelly at the gazebo, but that was probably a different day. But, for all we know, they could be hanging out at the gazebo and find their way into the tunnels. We might have the whole cast in the tunnels by the end of the next episode. So wandering around, maybe we'll find some more exits that we didn't know about.
And it will be actually one of the characters raised a really interesting point about the tunnel being completely unaffected by the earthquake. So it'd be kind of interesting to know how old this tunnel is and why it was made so sturdy.
The bits we've seen, though, they don't seem to be shored up by wood even or concrete. They just seem to be either natural formations, because some of them have little bits jutting out, or poorly excavated by someone. I mean, I'm thinking of rum runners. That's the obvious thing. And if Minx was around in 1925, that's the era of Prohibition. So,
and it does seem to me like the tunnel would have had to have been built. It's quite large. It would have been a large undertaking. I think it would have maybe needed to be a team effort by the Capwells and the Lockridges. I don't really know how you could hide the excavation of such a big tunnel from your neighbors, especially if it was going to their house.
So, Cece had said at one point his father had built the Capwell mansion, and Lionel just recently said his grandfather had built the Lockridge house. So, I wonder if there's like a sibling or something who was secretly working with a Lockridge on a rum running thing, and then the main parents didn't know about it or something like that, and they somehow managed to get the tunnels built. Be interesting. It seems like Minx knows, so I think...
we do know now that, considering the extensive damage that was done to the Capwell house in the earthquake, we know that the study remained intact, because no one discovered that entrance from the study.
Yeah, it's a pretty sturdy study. Pretty sturdy tunnel. So it's just doesn't look like it, with all the bits jutting out and things. It didn't seem to look anyone had made it very homey.
No.
If they were using it to store contraband at some point, you'd think there'd be like some sort of more smoothed out areas to store boxes or something. But a lot of it just seemed very, almost underground cave natural. Well, hopefully Minx will get to spill her story at some point.
Yeah.
She hasn't spilled anything about Brick yet, so she's good at keeping secrets.
She is, indeed.
And we will be back after, we have a Friday episode coming up.
Oh, boy.
We'll finish up this week with episode 167 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
This week's spotlight is on James Hong, who played Dave Chang on Santa Barbara. James Hong was born on February 22, 1929, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He studied civil engineering at the University of Minnesota and worked as a road engineer in Los Angeles County. He was previously married to Pearl Huang from 1967 to 1973, and since 1977 has been married to Susan Hong, with whom he has one child. Before Santa Barbara, Hong had several uncredited roles in 1954 and 1955. He then appeared in numerous TV series such as Sky King, The Man Called X, The Millionaire, Dragnet, Peter Gunn, Hawaiian Eye, Perry Mason, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Dream of Jeannie, I Spy, Mission Impossible, The Bob Newhart Show, Ironside, Hawaii Five-0, Macmillan and Wife, Kung Fu, All in the Family, SWAT, The Rockford Files, The Streets of San Francisco, The Bionic Woman, Days of Our Lives, Switch, The Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries, Maude, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, Soap, The Dukes of Hazzard, St. Elsewhere, Dynasty, Falcon Crest, Manimal, The A-Team, and General Hospital, with starring roles in the series The New Adventures of Charlie Chan as Barry Chan, and in Jigsaw John as Frank Chen. He appeared in movies such as Flower Drum Song, Chinatown, Blade Runner, and Airplane. Hong appeared as Oriental art expert Dave Chang in episodes 161 and 168 of Santa Barbara, and later as Harry Yamada in episode 843. After Santa Barbara, Hong appeared on many TV shows such as Beauty and the Beast, Jake and the Fat Man, MacGyver, Doogie Howser, M.D., The Adventures of Briscoe County, Jr., Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, The X-Files, Ellen, Friends, The Drew Carey Show, The Loop, Andy Barker P.I., The Big Bang Theory, Two Broke Girls, Key and Peele, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Hawaii Five-0. And as the voices of Professor Chang on Teen Titans, DeLong Wong on Jackie Chan Adventures, Chen on Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, and in movies such as Big Trouble in Little China, The Two Jakes, Wayne's World 2, Tank Girl, McHale's Navy, and as the voice of Mr. Ping, among others, in numerous Kung Fu Panda-related films, shorts, videos, and TV series. His most well-known role is as the Chinese restaurant owner in Seinfeld.
Welcome back!
Hello.
We've watched episode 167 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Friday, March 22nd, 1985. Now this episode features the last appearance of two very minor characters, which we'll get to as we come to them. Mason is at the State Street Bar with Sarah. This is now her third appearance. She was in episode 22, and then she was in this episode, and then yesterday, I believe. So, he confirms that was his secretary, and he wants her to work for him in private practice. And he offers her $1,500 a month, and she declines. And then he offers her $2,000, and she declines as well. It's obvious she's just not anxious to work for Mason again.
And I think, given that Mason has no money, this is probably a sensible position from her point of view, because he has no money. So he's making all these wonderful offers, but we know that he will have a lot of trouble paying someone $2,000 a month.
Well, I think probably it's also related to the threats that Cece probably had given to everyone who previously worked with Mason.
Yes.
She actually says it's not going to be easy for him to find work.
Yes, and by extension, if she went with him, it would really probably ruin her career as well.
Mm-hmm. Then Mason spots the prostitute that robbed him the other day. So he tries to get his money from her, but her pimp shows up, as well as two very large thugs, and they rob him again, take his money. And Frank, the bartender, says he owes $22. So things aren't going well for Mason. So those were the last appearance of Sarah, played by Janice Hayden, and Hooker, played by Laurie O'Brien. Laurie O'Brien went on to play the voice of Miss Piggy on Muppet Babies.
Ah.
Mason heads right over to the Capwell mansion and wanders into the study to see what's going on. Ted says, "Mason, what are you even doing here? I mean, Dad keeps throwing you out and you keep coming back."
I liked that line a lot.
So Mason asks Ted for some money. Eden asks when he's going back to work. Ted agrees to give him a check, and Eden says she doesn't think Cece would like that.
See, Eden knows perfectly well that Mason has been blacklisted, basically, so I found that a rather silly thing to ask.
Well, then Mason says that his father's keeping him from getting work,
Yeah.
and Ted says, "Why don't you go to L.A. or Boston or New York?"
Yeah.
So he doesn't seem at all upset at the idea that his brother will have to leave town.
No. Although, I mean, I think, practically speaking, Ted is probably taking a more useful approach than Eden is. But, yeah.
Yeah, because didn't Cruz suggest he knew some friends in San Francisco?
Yeah.
So he has an option.
Yeah. I mean, he has a Harvard degree or something, I believe, so he would be in demand.
Sophia also is in the same room, and she's having trouble having people believe her story, so she calls Marcello to come over, and Marcello tells them that she didn't fake her own death, that for many years Sophia's life was a series of nightmares as she spent so much time in institutions. And Cece comes out of the tunnel. And Mason says that it looks like he bet on the right man. But Cece wants to be left alone. And he has a flashback to the fight with Lionel, and we see that after a few initial blows, the main portion of the fight was them just telling each other how terrible they are. And I think it looks like both men have come away with things to think over. This is a very dialogue-heavy episode, really.
Yeah, I mean, they both emerge from the cave, and we'll talk about Lionel in a few minutes. Physically, not particularly harmed, but we realize as we see both characters thinking back to the conversation in the cave that they both have pretty heavy emotional wounds from this confrontation.
So it's kind of hard to summarize without just quoting a lot of it. So here's basically everything Lionel said to Cece. He said, "I was the one Sophia loved, then and through all that time. The reason you never even knew is because you were too busy imagining you were the perfect husband. All that matters to you are your oil derricks. You're like a tin god. Channing's death affected you so much because you invested everything in Channing, and when he died, all your hopes died with him. Every one of your other children is an inferior copy. Mason, you sent Eden away. You sent Kelly into the arms of Peter Flint and Joe Perkins. Ted was the one possibility of recreating Channing, but you blew that because he just committed the cardinal sin of hooking up with a Lockridge. You built a kind of temple at the feet of Channing Jr. Channing Jr. was the most loathsome, despicable person that I've ever known. Are all your idols fallen down? First Sophia, now Channing?"
And we see Cece at the end of this episode really getting quite teary thinking about this conversation. And I wasn't quite sure if it was because it's reminded him of Channing's death and all that he's lost, or if there's some part of what Lionel said about Channing not being the perfect son that maybe has penetrated Cece's armor a little bit, and it's maybe a truth that Cece has never quite been willing to look at. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think just the whole overall barrage, seems to have hit Cece, but it does seem like Channing, in some way, is the reason for it, because he's still angry with Sophia at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
When Lionel comes out of his end of the tunnel, he sends everyone away as well. Remembers what Cece said to him. You failed because all our children have united against you and their mother. The whole community is going to go against you. He feels sorry for Lionel's children and Augusta. You're going to go from woman to woman and end up a lonely, unloved man. You and Sophia have created your own hell, and I want you to burn in it for 100 years. I came here to tear you to pieces, but then some misguided soul would feel sorry for you. But I'm going to let you go because I think you've lost your fight. You're a hollow man.
Mm.
And Lionel's just as contemplative after this as Cece was on the other side of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm. And one of our last looks at Lionel this episode is him standing at the door with the suitcase that Augusta has packed for him. And, none of the family really wants to talk to him. So in a way, it seems like Cece's rant at him in the tunnel was almost like an oracle. It was almost like a prediction of how Lionel might be finding life at this point.
Now, throughout this episode, Ted tries to visit Lakin and manages to talk to her. Of course, she's otherwise engaged with wondering what's going on with her father. So he asks her to meet him on the road in a half an hour. Augusta tells her if she goes back with Ted, she's making a mistake she'll regret for a long time. And then Warren tells Augusta it's Lakin's life. She should do what she wants. So later on, Ted is waiting for her on the road, and we see through the window that Lakin's in her room, just looking out the window with no real intent to go out.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like a version of Romeo and Juliet, where Romeo's waiting there for her and Juliet's not coming to the window. Augusta kicks out Lionel, and Cece tells Sophia he's starting divorce proceedings. Sophia says Cece's the love of her life, and she begs him for a second chance. Then we see Sophia later at the State Street bar, and Augusta walks in and says there's no one on earth she hates more than Sophia. And Sophia says Augusta caused so many problems. I wish your life from now on would be hell, and I don't have to lift a finger. So this is an interesting place that this has ended up with both couples split up.
Yeah.
I guess it was kind of inevitable if you thought about it in advance, but I guess it just didn't all gel until this episode that's what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Augusta and Lionel side, I think, I don't know, it's going to be a while for Augusta to cool down, even for Lionel to try to win her back, but I assume that's the plan. It's not like there's anyone else in either of their lives, I don't think. Or is there a chance Sophia and Lionel are somehow gonna team up in some way? Or what are your thoughts on?
I think one thing this episode did is it kind of revived the whole question of Channing's death and brought that back into the fore. So I wonder if that will play a role going forward. If I have a theory that Augusta was the one who maybe added that little bit to Peter's note, and maybe that this will become evident or whatever. I don't know. I think Channing's death is going to become more a part of the storytelling moving forward, especially since we're moving into sweeps. But as for what happens with, I think Augusta and Lionel, it's going to take some time. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Lakin and Ted.
Warren or Ted? Okay.
Yeah, but Ted, Warren as well, but I think Lakin will will want to be there for her mother, but I think she'll also regret not, being with Ted as well. And I think for Sophia and CC, I don't know, we didn't see Gina in this episode. The last we saw, Gina and CC were apart. So I don't know. I don't think Sophia and CC are going to get back together anytime soon, but I don't think Sophia's going to leave Santa Barbara either.
Well, last time we saw Gina, she said she was leaving town. Maybe she's gone forever. Or she'll get wind of what happened and see if she can talk Cece into marrying her still.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
if
possible.
he's so angry with Sophia, and he does still want Brandon, well, maybe Gina will seek out Mason, actually, and say, hey, what's this stuff about Brandon? See if she can use something as leverage to get back in with Cece. That's a possibility.
Yeah, that's another plot point that was really big and we haven't heard much of, and it kind of got brought up again. And of course the Chinese puzzle box is still in play too. Mm-hmm. So whether Lionel will use that to get Mason off his back, I
don't know where Lionel will be living tonight.
Yeah,
there's maybe a hayloft at Warren's barn that he could sleep in, so yeah. Mason will probably be looking for him when he gets back for that puzzle box.
Yeah. So
Mason needs money, but then again, actually he might do what he did before, or did Peter Flint do that? He might go to Gina, because she's very rich, and say, hey, why don't I sell you the information about Brandon that you can use to get back with my father?
That would be a Peter Flint play, but
I think that's the way Mason could get some quick money. It's got the check from Ted, but Gina's got a lot of money, and I think she can be counted on to keep things quiet if Mason can sort of apologize for sicking Hank on her a little bit.
Well, and we don't know what Mason has in mind for the puzzle box that Lionel is busy counterfeiting right now, why he wants it so much. So if it's the counterfeit one he ends up with, it probably won't be of much use to him, but if maybe in the process of counterfeiting it, Lionel will actually open the original one, and that might be something good for Lionel that he can use in some way.
Hopefully Dave Chang won't make it an exploding puzzle box.
Yeah.
Maybe Lionel put a fake map to the Emerald Island in there. Mason will go on a wild goose chase.
Yeah.
And I think Lakin and Ted probably, it looks like Lakin's shutting him out, so I think our thought that Ted, at least my thought that Ted and his teacher might end up commiserating could still happen. Now that Larry's back out of town, I guess.
Or Ted could, I mean, there could be new characters introduced as well for Ted. I think they will still be straining against, all the stuff happening in their families, because I don't think their feelings for each other have been extinguished at all. Ted's been very open about his feelings, and I think Lakin is more reserved, but I think she is definitely still torn up about Ted, so there will still be tensions there, I think. Don't know if Kelly's... I don't know quite where Kelly's mental state is right now.
Yeah, she wasn't in this episode.
No, she wasn't. So, but Marcello seems to be very much a part of their lives right now, and I think he'll have a much larger role to play going forward.
And we'll see if Mason is able to set himself up in business.
Yeah. I think something has to turn for Mason, because a destitute Mason isn't really as fun as one who has a bit more power and a bit more money and a bit more arrogance.
Well, he's got a few possible irons in the fire. So. And we didn't see Amy today either. So.
No Amy or Brick. So that storyline's fallen away, and I guess we're in despair of ever seeing Jade or Danny again, but it would be nice if we did.
Yep. All right, well, that brings us to the end of week 34. So we'll be back next week with a Monday episode 168 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe you're the one my dad should be worried about.